Hello everyone, my name is Kingsley Martin, and I would like to take this special occasion to remember a very dear friend of mine by the name of Gary Chason. This is his picture here. It's from the set, I think this is from the set of The Hands of Time that he worked on with a man by the name of Mark Doherty, along with a number of other filmmakers. But Gary wrote that, as I recall. So, Gary was born on September 23rd of 1943, and he left this plane of existence on April 18th of 2021. This year he would have been 78 years old in the physical form. So, I met Gary back in 2002, the fall of 2002. He was teaching an acting class here in Austin at a place called Hollywood Studios. And the class was all about, getting camera experience as an actor. So he would film you and he would teach you about technique, about, how to work with the camera and know where it's at without just blatantly looking into it, in most cases where you're not breaking the fourth wall. And so he would, so that was the class. And fortunately, at the end, I got to do 2 scenes, which were really fun. But at the end, he had a thing called the Golden Walnut Awards, where he would play the videos and they would vote on best actor in a drama, best actor in a comedy, best actress, that sort of thing. And he had a bunch of people come in and be like the judges, and they would, vote for, whomever. And so I was fortunate enough to get one of these golden walnuts, and I cherished it for many, many years. I had it for over a decade, and then it ended up being stolen with some property that I had that was also ripped off. But that was my first experience with Gary. The 2 projects or 2 scenes that I did in his class, one was from a script he had already written that was ultimately to be shot, called God Thinks You're a Loser. And I got to do that scene. You can check out God Thinks You're a Loser among other projects he did on Amazon.com. I know God Thinks You're a Loser is up there, Charlie's Ear, Everything or Nothing. There's a number of projects that he's connected to on there, so you can look up his name on Amazon.com. You can even ask your Alexa device to tell you who he is, and it will tell you at least some information about him. The last time I checked on it, it did not report his passing date correctly, but anyway, there's a Wikipedia article and kinds of things like that about him. But look him up. I definitely encourage you to do it, because outside of the extra stuff I'm about to share here with you, there's a lot more to learn about Gary Chason and from Gary Chason. So we did God Thinks You're Losers, the 1 scene. The second scene was an original short fringe he wrote called Terminally Straight. And I was fortunate to be in that, and the concept of Terminally Straight was, there's a man on his deathbed with his mother sitting at his bedside holding his hand, and he has this out-of-body experience and talks with her right before his passing about, why he always thought she wanted him to be gay. And that was one of the things that made Gary unique as a storyteller, is that he would take conventional concepts and turn them on their ear and put that spin on them. So instead of it being someone concerned that their child had been gay, this was about a woman who was sad that her son had not been gay. And so he was ahead of his time in that way, and breaking sort of, conventionality on how you would tell that story. And that was a great little piece. It's about a 12-minute piece. And he actually mounted it as a stage production in 2003, and I got to be in that first mounting of it on the stage, debut of it on the stage at a place called Hyde Park Theater, which still exists in Austin, around 43rd and Guadalupe. And it was part of something called Frontera Fest, and it debuted in January of 2003, as I recall. I have a tape of it somewhere that I need to get transferred to digital so it doesn't, go bye-bye. But it was a great opportunity, and then I moved to New York for a while, and, we lost touch for, all sorts of reasons, life and stuff. And fast forward to 2015, and I am living in Houston, and it's been years since I've been doing film and such, and I want to get back into acting because I enjoy it. And I look for classes, and there's Gary, smiling face, excited as always, ready to teach acting. So let's see, if he was 78, or going to be 78 this year, and I met him, I guess it would have been right around his birthday, actually, in 2002. So that was 18 years ago. So he had literally just turned, 19? So he was 59. He was just about to hit 60 at the time. And so 2015, we reconnect. I go to one of his acting classes because I loved them the first time I did them. I did it, and learned a lot. His skill as a teacher, although he was great the first time, he was even that much better in 2015, and continued to get better, and had different kinds of classes he was doing now. He was doing things where he actually gave you on-set experience or film production experience as an actor, not just, working with the camera, but also working with some of the complicated aspects of working on a film, including doing dubbing, where you have to go and re-record your voice over your dialogue because of an audio issue or whatever it was. Working with marks, which is a huge part of filmmaking, kind of knowing your position as you walk around set. You have these marks that are on the floor, and shows you how to do that. Working with Dolly Tracks, when you're doing a dolly shot and you have to walk towards the camera, not look at the camera, but walk towards it while you're kind of straddling these dolly tracks and creating this scene. And it was just great because it taught you so much. It continued to teach me things, even though I had already worked in a number of films at the time. But for the beginner who had never done any of this stuff, it was so terrific because it prepared them for these different things that could happen on film. And I don't think any teacher I was aware of was really actively doing that, at least not, I had ever been aware of. So at some point, Gary ended up doing some training at a studio, and we hosted him doing classes at my studio for a short time when his was wrongfully taken from him, I think, and by the building, not renewing leases and all that, but that's a whole other story. But anyways, so we reconnected, did that class, and then in 2017, there is this, I think it's international, kind of project called 48-Hour Film Festival. And Gary and I decided to work together on that in the year 2017. And he wrote the script for a project that ended up being called Unprotected, which was all about this. It was like an infomercial. Our style that we were selected to do, that we drew to do, was documentary style. So we kind of made a mockumentary concept of this guy who owns this, condom, empire, and you kind of see all the things behind the scenes of this infomercial, kind of intertwined with the infomercial. And Gary wrote the initial script for that, and I continued to build on it along with the other production team and cast. Don't want to mention a bunch of people because this is really about Gary, but the cast and the crew were very instrumental in, kind of further defining it because Gary wrote us a great starting script, because the whole idea was you have 48 hours to do this, right? So we had a few hours to write the script, and then we're on to shooting it. So that's just Gary's skill. He has that ability to write a scene like that, and if you give him a few starting points, he can just kind of run wild with it. He's done a number of projects, even in his classes, when he was teaching people film technique and doing scenes and all that, where he actually made short films out of those that ended up going to film festivals and getting, awards. This is a guy who could take a scene study class that's specifically intended for just learning how to work on camera and turn it into a production that actually gets acknowledgement within the film community. And he's shooting most of it inside of a little classroom. And because of his skill set to light and position a camera and direct and all these things, he could actually turn it into something that was more than just a class project. It became its own sort of little life out there in the world. And he did a lot of things like that. Clementine's Grave, Puppet Love, oh gosh, I'm not going to remember all of them, but he did a bunch of them. You go search YouTube, go search Amazon.com, and I'm sure you'll find a bunch of stuff that Gary was involved with. So he did that, taught those classes. At one point when he came over to, we did the Unprotected film in 2017. Unfortunately, a failure on my part, being kind of still back into the game and trying to edit and all that. We didn't get to make it to the 48 hours. They did show it, believe it or not, but it wasn't intended. But we got Unprotected out of it, and Gary was a huge part of the writing process of that. So then in 2018, Gary connected with a man by the name of Ben Schneider and began working on a project that Ben had written a script called Sweet Velvet Grace. And he wanted Gary to play this con artist character who goes around pretending to be a preacher and speaking at all, an evangelist, kind of going around and, talking to people about helping the poor and helping the needy, but he's supposed to be like a con artist, and then he meets his match with this, sort of spunky young girl who is on her own too. And I liked the concept of Ben's script, but Gary was wanting to shoot a proof of concept of it so they could then take it to investors and get money to really mount a quality production with, as reasonable a budget as possible. And so he was doing this proof of concept, and they needed, a certain amount of financial resource. And at the time I was able to help. And so I would be considered, I guess, the executive producer of that. But I really think of myself as more of the financial kind of, backer than anything related to a producer, because Gary was the guy really producing it. I invested in it, no offense to Ben, because I think he's a good talent, but I invested in it because of Gary, because I knew what Gary could do with a streamlined budget, because I had seen what he had done with no budget. So I was, very happy to support him in this endeavor because it was something he really wanted, and I thought he deserved it. So we did that, and he did the Sweet Velvet Grace proof of concept. I even got to act with him a little bit for the first time in our time knowing each other. We got to act a little bit together in one of the scenes, and it was just great. It came out great because Gary knew how to, what's the old joke? Squeeze a nickel till the buffalo choked. That's kind of what Gary was capable of doing. And he knew how to do it because he knew that, he was that Bowfinger character. If you've ever seen the movie Bowfinger, where he basically says he has $2,186 to make a film. And he says, all this stuff with, millions of dollars, that's after a gross deducted profit, 10 cents to the nut type thing. In reality, all movies, $2,186. But Gary was that kind of a personality and that kind of a filmmaker. He wanted it. He would find ways to make it work. And he always did. And that's how he accomplished so many things he did. He wasn't the one who had that access to millions and millions of dollars. But that's what made him a true filmmaker to me, because he utilized the resources around him, collaborated with people, and made things that, if he didn't have that determination and that positive spirit of getting things done, it wouldn't have been done. And so he's a teacher because he shows us that sort of stuff. He continues to be a teacher to me, because every time I think, well, I can't do this or I can't do that, I think, well, how would Gary have gotten around, the lack of this element to make it happen? And so he did that, and then he accomplished the SBG POC, and then they continued to try and find, the funds to shoot it. Gary, to the point of really caring enough about the project that he said, look, I'd like to play this role, but if it'll get the film made, let a bigger actor do it. I'll be a part of it in a smaller way as an actor, and maybe do working on it as a filmmaker, as the producer. And so he wasn't selfish in it. Like, he enjoyed the idea of acting, but it wasn't about Gary in the end. It was about making the project and telling the story. And that's one of the things that really was beautiful about this guy. He had healthy self-confidence, but he didn't have a vanity that said it has to be me or nobody else. It was just, let's get it done, and I'll do whatever it takes to get it done. And so, unfortunately, Sweet Love of Grace was still sort of in limbo, and obviously faced that many more challenges with the COVID thing happening. But in the year of 2020 and spreading into 2021 here. But so that was still sort of in limbo, figuring out when it was going to be made or would it be made and all this. But Gary, continuing to move forward with his creative spirit, said he had been working on something since the 90s, as I recall. And it's this thing called Christabel, which is based off of the play. I think it's Lord Byron, right, who did Christabel. But he said he wanted to take that poem and turn it into a visual piece of art. And so he wrote a script and created this whole story and got music created for it, collaborated with some talented people to make music for it. And just, he was so excited about this. And he, like always, pulled it off. He got the first act shot of this piece. And if you can see Christabel, I don't know where you would see it, because I'm not sure if it's release aspect at this point. I wasn't, intimately involved in that project in any way, but I've seen it. And if you can see Christabel, then do see it, because it was so good and so great, and just showed the kind of director Gary was still. No matter what age he was, he had that skill, and he could turn concept on their ear or bring something new to an idea and really create this beautiful project. And it's stunning. It's visually very stunning. It's, the colors are just going to pop off in certain aspects in this black, kind of, hazy background of what they're dealing with, the characters are. But it's very worthwhile seeing. He got the first act shot and was working on getting the second act. Of course, we had the COVID thing, as I mentioned, come up here within the globally. And so that did not get to be completed as of then. But he got to do it, and then I think they're still trying to work on getting the second part of it done, and I think it would be great. I think Gary's spirit will be a part of that production. I just wish Gary was physically able to be there on the set, directing the actors, because he deserved that. He worked hard to get there. And so another thing Gary and I got to work on was a thing that I had written specifically with Gary in mind. That's the only reason I'm mentioning this, is because in 2018, 19, while he's working on SVG, I started thinking about this idea for this script series called The Troubled Hearts Anthology. And the main character, or one of the two main characters, was this man named Gordon. And when I was writing it, Gary was the guy. He was Gordon. So as I'm writing it, I'm imagining Gary saying it, putting his own twist on it, him being that presence and having that strength, but a vulnerability that he could show off as well. Dear Pillow is another great film that Gary did. You should go see Dear Pillow. Go check that one out as well. He's great in that. He's an actor in that. It's a great movie. So I wrote Troubled Hearts Anthology and got to do a staged reading of the production before trying to mount it as a film to kind of just see how it felt, how it read out loud. And Gary did get to play the role in the script readings for the first three of them, and I have a recording of that, fortunately, and so I can listen back and listen to Gary's performance. And now, in the spirit of Gary Chason, and since Gary will not be able to physically appear within that film, I'm even thinking about, when I make that film, anthology of shorts, that I will spin it on its ear like Gary would. Instead of it being, basically a number of Caucasian people, it will be a black family, or it will be an Asian family, but something different, because if I don't have the guy who I imagine doing that, then let me do something different with it. And so, in the spirit of Gary, I will be doing it that way. So after Christabel, during this hiatus of Christabel, Gary started taking a script that he had been, working on the ideas for years. I think it was called Legend. I don't want to be wrong about that, but I think it was called Legend. But it was, I don't even want to get into the story because it was his property and all that, but it had been something he'd been working on. And it was a very kind of big concept project. And so he decided to novelize it. And so in addition to the script, he was creating a novel for it and had written the first of, I think, 3 parts that were going to be for it. So he was always working. I guess this is the thing. I'm just so impressed by Gary, is that he never stopped. We're talking about a man who, in many cases, they're retired. They're not looking at the next big project in life. They're enjoying the, what do they call them? The twilight years, as they were. But he was like, no, I'm not done. I'm not done at all. He's 77 years old and writing a novel at 77 when he's never written a novel before. Well, he had written the first one, but he was, he was writing a novel in his latter 70s. And he never had a conquered spirit by any stretch of the imagination. He always knew that he was going to keep working as long as he could keep working. And even when he had some health challenges that came up in the last year, he kept working. He kept thinking about what he was going to do if he couldn't do it and preparing to get back to doing it. And he was finally, I communicated with Gary just a couple of days. No, as a matter of fact, I take it back. I communicated with Gary the day before his passing. And it was a text message exchange saying, "How are you doing? I want to check in on you." Because I don't live in Houston anymore, where he lived at the time of his physical departure. And he said, all these things are, coming back, healing from this and that. don't want to get into his personal health business, but I'm healing from this and that, and, things are good, getting back into it again. And then 2 days later, I'm hearing about, Gary's passing, and I'm just like shocked, because 2 days prior, it was like things are going back to the way, he's going to get back on that horse, and, make for new territory and make these things happen. But he never gave up. Till the very last minutes, this man was a fighter. And he teaches us that, he teaches us that by continuing to follow his dreams and his passions in life. He was rich in so many other ways than the financial aspect. And really, there's a song that makes me think about Gary a lot, and it's called Three Wooden Crosses. And the chorus line of this song is, it's not what you take when you leave this world behind you. It's what you leave behind you when you go. And it's about, what is your legacy? What do you leave for the world that improved the quality of it? And Gary improved the quality of it for people who wanted to get into filmmaking or wanted to get into acting. He left them with that knowledge that he had accrued over his, 7.5 decades of being an artist. From the time he was a child, he would do little shorts and plays with his sisters, from what I'm understanding, for his family. So he was always an entertainer and a performer and a storyteller, and he did it for 7.5 decades. That's a pretty remarkable thing, if you ask me. And he teaches you there's never any good time or time. It's never over. So in other words, you could start acting in your 70s if that's what you want to do. You could do anything you want to do if you're determined to make it happen. And he did. He did. Every day that I know of and that I've known him, he has been the person who has found a way to make it happen. He's a great writer, a great director. See, I don't even think filmmaker really is an appropriate term for him, because he was so much more than a filmmaker. And he was so much more than a storyteller. Maybe storyteller is the best, but he was really a guru within the industry of entertainment. And I feel very blessed to have known him. And I feel very sad that he's not physically here so I can give him a hug. And a lot of people weren't even, being able to touch people of more mature ages during this last year of COVID, because of fear that, the more mature people would be the most adversely affected by it, which they were. And so, tragically, I did not get to spend any quality time with him in this last period. He was a remarkable human being. But beyond that, he was a remarkable spirit. He had the energy of a young spirit, but the drive of an old spirit that knew that things could be overcome. And he would make sure that he would not squander the time that he had. And he left a legacy behind for all of us, one that I continue to reflect on all the time. What I learned from him, and it has improved me as a person. I grew up without a father, and in a lot of ways, Gary was my, entertainment, father. He was my passion father in a lot of ways. And he left behind a lot for us. A lot you can learn if you've never heard of Gary Chason until this moment. and a lot for those of us who were fortunate enough to know him. And it's all in his projects. That's him up there, his creative spirit, his, determination, his commitment. So, thank you, Gary. I will continue to thank you every time that I accomplish something, or every time I overcome something when I think that it's not possible. Your family, you always will be. I love you, brother. I love you. And I know you're in the spirit of the filmmaking community and the artistic community. I know your presence is still there and being felt and being reactive. And I was sharing in this sort of write-up, there's a lady by the name of Susan Elkins, who's a very nice lady, a very dear friend of Gary's, and she's been overseeing this process of memorializing him. And she was talking about collecting sort of, people's sort of retrospectives of Gary in a written form. And she had invited me to, contribute if I liked. And I didn't know for a while how to write down what I'd want to say about Gary, because, how do you kind of summarize it? And so I was struggling with this, and then one morning I had a dream about Gary. And it was two things that stood out to me within the dream. The first one was we're like this park on a sunny day, and Gary has these two dogs that are like these brown colored dogs. I don't know what breed they were, obviously, but he had them dressed up in Santa costumes, and he was shooting something. We were shooting something with him with these two dogs. We're in Santa costumes, and then later in the dream, we're standing at this gate late at night, and I guess I'm standing there on the inside of the gate, and he's on the outside of this sort of wrought iron kind of chest level, rib level high gate, and we're saying goodnight. And the last things he's saying to me is, "Okay, Kingsley, remember, we only need $1 million to make it happen." And he starts strolling off down the sidewalk in the twilight. And I say, "Gary, you are $1 million." And he goes, he turns back to me, and kind of with this wink in his eye and little smile, he goes, "Okay." And that says to me the same kind of writing in my sort of retrospective of him, that's really what Gary taught you, is that whatever you want to accomplish, you are that $1 million that can make it happen. And that the check you're writing to succeed is a check you're writing on you because of faith in yourself and confidence that you can do something. And so I encourage other people who knew Gary to share their stories, put them out for people to see. I think there's a lot of valuable lessons in our time with Gary and what he has left behind. And he's impacted the kind of people we've become and the kind of storytellers we have become. And thank you, Gary. Gary Chason, ladies and gentlemen. September 23rd, 1943, April 18th, 2021. Go watch his stuff. Read up on him. Find out everything you can about him, and learn what you can from this independent guru of storytelling and filmmaking. And be well, everybody. God bless. Rest well, Gary.